And they will wait a minute. You're thinking that these people who are in opposition, the Democrats who are against Biden, are supposed to be necessarily caring about him as loyalty or fidelity or anything like that, because these assholes don't give a damn about us in general anyway. This time it happens to be Biden, so now you care when you vote for these fuckers that you're now complaining about. I wish I wouldn't have voted for that person. It's like they weren't. Yeah, they're all corrupt to some degree. Come on. In this case, it's hitting your guy, and you don't like
Good evening. Welcome. This is the After Hours show. My name is Joe in Norway. I'm joined by Ann Lee, a retired college professor and community member of the Daily Kos. She's a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and is a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Evening, Ann.
Hey there, Joe. What's for supper?
Oh, dessert. We already had supper.
Ah, excellent.
Give me a second. I'm in the control room.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
getting
Go
feedback.
Well, welcome to all. I had a slight couple-day hiatus from Daily Kos. Not like I wasn't paying attention to it, but so I returned today to a flurry of things, and certainly a lot happened this week. Republican National Convention, quite interesting, quite weird. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those things. Trump gave a speech that was the new record, a new historical record, 90 minutes for an acceptance speech. And normally they're really quite short. And so anything that gets up into that range is excessive. And I think Trump wasn't even thinking about that issue. I think what was important to Trump was that he was on and he had national television time. The ratings haven't proved out very well, although I'm curious to hear what the ratings were for his little excessive speech, which went on until past midnight on the East Coast. So it's up to you. Your mileage may vary. So what's for dessert, Joe?
Well, we've got, I was out foraging all afternoon.
Nice.
We've got, seems like everything's becoming ripe now, maybe a little early. I think the berries, in this case, we've got wild blueberries and wild raspberries.
Oh, yum.
We also have crowberries, but we didn't pick any of those. I've got meadowwort or meadowsweet or meadwort. So they used to be used this in cordials. They used to put it in for mead.
Okay.
Mead. It has the seed has a bit of almondy taste, so a very strong almond taste, and they use it for dried out for teas and whatnot. So we'll
Nice.
use this. I'm going to make a wild raspberry and blueberry crumble and do some experimental vegetarian cream here with the cashews. Well, cashews and meadowsweet.
Yes.
See how that works. I'm not sure. We'll make a little cream for the crumble. You got
Sounds
a
good.
nifty little blueberry picker from old school blueberry picker.
Cool.
Little
Quite cool.
speeds things up, damages the fruit a bit, but they're kind of practical.
Well,
Thank
definitely you get
you.
to take more down. Yeah. Excellent.
So commenced to baking. Oh, better fire up the stove.
Okie dokie.
Rusty on this baking business, you know. All right, let's go.
Okay. It's been a really interesting week. I mean, it has been dominated by the GOP. At least two people have died at the not at the convention. One within the convention grounds was beat to death by security officers. That happened very early on. No one talks about this. Mainstream media certainly didn't talk about it. And then an unhoused person further away from the area was shot and killed. He was wielding a knife. He was in an altercation and shot and killed by Ohio police officers who are there as security for the convention. So you've had a couple of incidents, needless to say, that have gotten no attention as far as I can tell in terms of the coverage of the convention. The conventions normally are about, 4 days or so. I mean, they prepared for them for, 2 years or a year. And so the overall view, of course, was that it was well organized. I think that was the compliment that was given to it by mainstream media. The problems, of course, are all the kind of wacky people you had going up there. I think this is just generally a trend, is that you have all kinds of folks being invited to speak. And for the final night, Trump had people like Hulk Hogan. Let's see, who else?
The Hulkster?
The Hulkster. Trumpomania is... and he did his signature tearing of his shirt. That is, he had a suit jacket on, and he had one T-shirt, a Trump T-shirt, that he tore off to reveal another shirt underneath.
So we're on full-on idiocracy now, huh?
It's full-on idiocracy, and I think there's a kind of play on that. Unfortunately, the subtext there, and so that was there, and I think that probably got a lot of people attracted to the, and they didn't promote it very much. I mean, the Hulk Hogan appearance. It's sort of unfortunate because he did give a fairly decent speech, probably better than Trump's in terms of organization. Trump's speech was, having watched the whole damn thing after watching part of it live, it's quite weird. He starts off kind of giving a kind of confessional about what sort of happened, and that divine intervention was at work, and it's miraculous that a bullet missed him. Although, as I've said, it's unclear whether the actual bullet did it or whether a glass fragment did it. It's if you look at the sufficient number of photos of the immediate event, there were a couple of little flecks of material, maybe not glass or polycarbonate, on his cheek. And you could sort of see that it didn't break the skin, but they were kind of lodged in his, epidermis, whatever. So that's been the problematic, and it is a plan of analysis of whether there was or wasn't a bullet, and a lot of disinformation, etc. A fascinating event. I mean, all things considered, since we last met, and this was last Saturday, at about 125, 130 yards, a clean shot from a building. The perpetrator, 20-year-old fellow by the name of Thomas Crooks, from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. Actually cased the joint. He scoped out the place a week before. There've been the FBI and you know all the usual sorts have been at work and without rehearsing the entire event. It's just interesting. The New York Times or was the Washington Post? Well, either of them have been talking about whether the Secret Service really did their job, and there was sexist accusations that somehow women Secret Service agents were at fault, which is such a weird claim. But there were claims being made by right-wingers, and it's quite amusing. I would say that relative to choosing people who can provide close body coverage, they should probably get taller women. I would just say that because of the discrepancies in size. They just grabbed Trump and, threw him to the ground. On my point, as I was mentioning before among us, 10 shots were made, eight shots by the shooter using an AR-15 type rifle. They haven't identified the specific rifle yet, but it was the standard 5.56 millimeter round in it. And for some reason, he had a huge magazine on it. He only got 10 shots off, or 8 shots off. And the fact is, one of the 8 shots actually got near Trump, which is actually very poor shooting at 100 plus yards. I would just say that right now. And unfortunately, other people got hit. A couple of people were wounded. A person was killed, a firefighter, and a chief of a fire chief, actually, of a small town in Pennsylvania, a Trump follower. I guess when the first shot started, he immediately dove on top of his family and got hit in the back of the head with a round. One of these, as I said, errant rounds of the 8, the group of 8 that was fired at Trump. There is some argument that would say that one of the rounds hit one of the teleprompters, and those shards are the actual thing that caused a slight injury on Trump's ear. It did clip out a chunk of the ear, whatever it was, whether it was a bullet or not. And if it was a bullet, Trump, it was lucky. I mean, he turned his head as the first rounds came out, so he was sort of facing the sound of where the bullets were coming from. Crooks was on top of one of these steel buildings, and was fairly hidden from the Secret Service. There's a tremendous literature on the Secret Service handling this, because the 2 sniper teams were not in good position, and one of them was just, they were just trying to get set up once there was about 90 seconds when there was an alert. The people on the ground proclaiming that they saw this guy with a gun on top of the building. It was the only building that had a clean shot at the stage. And there's a bunch of side stories about whether there was a cop who tried to stop this, but was scared off or whatever, warned off, as it were. The more recent story by, I think it's the New York Times, is that, this was beyond the perimeter, the security perimeter. And unfortunately, you have to support with a lot of outside law enforcement agencies. And in this particular case, the Beaver County Sheriff's Department sniper team has a lot to somebody's gonna have to interview them. Why were you inside the building instead of on top of the building during the event? Seems to me it's the kind of event you do as a sniper team. You actually want to be on top of the building, because if they were, the guy would never have gotten into position. I mean, that's just it's fairly simple. Guy wasn't well organized. He's a nursing home worker. He's still in or just out of a community college. His high school classmates mentioned that he was abused a lot, bullied nearly every day. At least that's what this one person who's still at the high school, I assume, was talking about. And all these things, the stories are very interesting. There's just he didn't seem to have much of a social media footprint, and his father, somebody did an analysis of, I think they were looking at, and this analysis is fairly normal for most states. The number of guns owned by a particular person is available as a kind of database, and so there, and X number of guns over 20, they sort of puts you on a list, I guess, and so there is like a little map where you could actually see that this fellow Crooks, he's still living with his parents. Was the most dangerous guy in the neighborhood. I mean, in terms of flagging it from a geolocation point of view, it's really sort of interesting there. But it's just because they had a lot of guns. The father had bought this AR-15 pattern rifle only 6 months ago, so it wasn't Crooks's. In other words, he didn't go into the gun store and buy it, although he did stop off at a gun store and bought 50 rounds of ammunition before he got to the event. So that's kind of what happened. I'm not sure if he was fully ready or fully thought out these sorts of things, but he did have the ingredients for explosive devices, one in his car and one at home. There seemed to have been some attention to try and get something to trigger it, although the government is sort of vague about what they are and how they were set up. Needless to say, that's all being analyzed in Washington. Sniper team was a very good sniper team. They just weren't positioned well relative to seeing that the analysis says that there was one very large tree that sort of was in the way that obscured your view. So you had to sort of look around it, and had the shooter been about 5 feet to the right from the police point of view, they wouldn't have seen him at all. And yet he still had a clean view of Trump. And so that is just actually interesting. There were plenty of diagrams. The New York Times did most of the major players have done incredibly interesting diagrams of this stuff. The counter sniper team, there are two counter sniper teams being positioned. This all has to do with Secret Service and how they plan to do this stuff. And we've seen enough movies on this kind of controversy. Line of fire where, the idea of the issue of female Secret Service agents sort of comes up, and just in terms of thinking about these matters. Anyway, the counter sniper team, and yes, there probably will be a mini series or a TV movie or something pitched. There have been Secret Service agents always figure in some of these. There's actually a couple of really interesting series that revolve around either the Secret Service or the FBI relative to political stuff, and particularly stuff that includes sniper activity. And so there are two counter sniper teams. You have an observer and the trigger puller. Actually, they can do either, and both are armed. In this particular case, standard arm for. And it is a standard arm for some sniper teams. Say, it's a long gun with it has an AR-15 pattern, but sort of pattern, but it is it's chambered in 300 Winchester Magnum, so a tremendous amount of stopping power. So the counter sniper team delivered 2 rounds and either got him on the first one, definitely got him on the second one. So they only shot 2 rounds, and the event was over after about 30 seconds of kind of engagement. The first 8 rounds and something. I think there was a slight overlap, and that's kind of what happened. That sadly, of course, somebody got killed, and a couple of people got wounded. There's an iconic image of Trump pumping his fist in the air, yelling "fight, fight, fight," blah blah blah, and sort of resisting his the Secret Service people who are trying to drag him off the stage. And of course, we all know that Trump is at least 215 pounds, and so they're trying to get him to a vehicle. And once he got to the vehicle, he sort of tried to break away from them again to step on the step and appear above the security team to wave to his followers. And there was screaming and the usual. You can imagine the chaos going on. if there'd been a second shooter, well, it's just interesting. And this, needless to say, compelled GOP politicians on the floor of the convention to accost the head of the United States Secret Service as she was walking through and demanding answers and blah blah blah. Congress is going to drag her for hearings this coming week. So much excitement coming. That was sort of the biggest event, considering that the last the real assassinations, actual assassinations, are few and far between relative to the last American one. Attempts, certainly there are plenty, and probably more reminiscent are the ones that are like the ones Squeaky Fromm and Gerald Ford. Several people tried to kill Gerald Ford. Two of them are Manson-related people, so that's sort of interesting. And of course, there's the 1960s and those the single JFK assassination, but other assassination attempts as well. So that's pretty much what happened. Saturday, there was the usual convention stuff. They have musical acts and other kinds of yammering people in funny hats. It's all kind of cosplay, political cosplay on the floor of the convention. An entire Wisconsin delegation with cheesehead hats on, so that was sort of amusing, I suppose. And the usual Texas, everyone wearing a cowboy hat, whatever. So there's a kind of spectacle element to it. The stage video was actually quite normal, and in the sense that all they tended to use, particularly for Trump, is a version of the White House behind him. So it was really mundane, rather than in 2016, where the letters of Trump formed a building. It was just quite multi-story dominant. They did have a smaller such display with the words Trump on it, but it was dramatic.
Could
Trump's
I get a
speech, as I
10-minute
said,
timer
90
timer here from someone, please? Someone set the timer for 10 minutes. I can't.
10 minutes.
Don't have
7:20.
Oh, I got one. I just found the old school one here. There we go.
All right.
How do we use this thing?
Okie dokie.
There we go. Okay, cool.
So the only surprise, and it is the only surprise of conventions, is the choice of the running mate. J.D. Vance was chosen, Senator J.D. Vance from Ohio, whose original name was Bowman. And you should look up the story of how he decided on his name. It has lots of variations, and I think he chose his name because it's easy. It's a single. It's a single syllable and doesn't take up a lot of space on signs. But that aside, J.D. Vance is now fully imbued with the ideology, or at least the rhetoric, of Trump, and so he just cranked out all of those things. I didn't realize, and I wasn't paying attention, of course, that his wife is Indian, that is South Asian, also a lawyer. That will be interesting relative to the election campaign. J.D. Vance tried his best not to outshine Trump. He didn't talk very long, and said all the same sort of things that are all Trumpist ideology. So that's the convention generally, fit around all the usual things, the Trump positions on a variety of things. And yes, they were consonant. Ultimately, the Trump speech, as I said, started with this sort of it's not so much a confessional, but he tried to be, he had promised that he had changed his speech and that he was going to talk with a better tone, a toned down element. Well, I think that lasted all of a minute. Everything else afterwards, essentially wound up being the standard, the standard Trump stump speech for his rallies, except toned down, and it was more like a Writers Club roast without the real humor. All the same sorts of things. And I'm not going to amplify them, but they're lies. There were lies. There were the CNN's Daniel Dale counted at least 20 lies. There are a lot more actually, and if you count all the kind of bizarre mistruths about where the economy is, what the crime rate is, all of these things that are the standard items in his speech that bears little resemblance to reality, and it's just typically Trump. It's unfortunate, but you sort of have to assume that whatever he's going to say is a lie, and sort of work through whether he actually said something true. So that kind of went on. As I said, 90 minutes. Surprise, surprise! The first viewing in public of Melania and the Donald. She actually came up on stage, and there was the usual standing around. Baron Trump was nowhere to be seen. So that was sort of interesting as well. I mean, he has been trying to avoid being a target, as it were, at Trump rallies. He was introduced for one rally. That was a couple weeks ago. So, and the usual balloon drop, and the reporters on the floor. There didn't seem to be the kind of outrages that you would have in other kinds of conventions. I think that they're pretty strict. They were very strict. It was a very orderly convention. Didn't have the kinds of disruptions or challenges or Republicans are very disciplined in Milwaukee, and that kind of happened. There was very little coverage of protests. A protest area was designated. I think there was only one or two images of, and there were multiple groups there, but very little mainstream media coverage of protests there. Let's see, what else? Not much else. I think the ultimate thing is there's, in about a month, there's, the comparison will be made to the Democrats' national convention in Chicago. And that will have its own kinds of issues, but otherwise, relatively peaceful, calm. J.D. Vance being J.D. Vance, and it's hard to tell, but my perception is that he wears mascara or eyeliner, and I find that just weird. I'm sure someone has, it was some advisor, some consultant that said, your eyes don't pop well enough, and it's just very strange. So there's been a kind of meme underlined that has to do with J.D. Vance's eye makeup versus Trump's troweled on orangeness, which was there. Oh, yes, the bandage. The fact that Trump had a little, it's probably less than a half-inch clipped off of the top of his ear, because you could see, the image right after it was hit by whatever it was. And it's about maybe a half-inch by an inch or an inch and a half clipped off of the top ear. But the bandage was a 3-inch by 2-inch or 3-inch by 3-inch size bandage. It covered his whole right ear, which was fascinating for many of us, because clearly the whole ear wasn't hit. It was just that top little area, but the bandage was just monstrous. And so there were jokes about that, and things that got us into trouble about commenting about whether he'd gotten hit by a bullet at all or not. And that's a whole other issue. But we can presume, we know that ammunition was flying through the air, because there was some stop action photos of the bullet and the trail of the bullet going past his head, which are quite fascinating, and a good bit of digital photography by the press. Press came out with some very interesting images. Worth your time to look at some of the best of the images from that event, just because they're just sort of dynamic. And as I said, you have this kind of image of Trump resisting being covered by his Secret Service agents, who, in this particular instance, they do go into a full clinch. If the protectee is standing, they literally all, it's a group hug. And as I said, some of the women Secret Service agents are a little shorter, so that that does expose a 6 foot tall candidate to a little bit of harm. He was worried about losing his, which people don't pay enough attention to his shoes with the lifts in them, because the lift goes all the way up to the top part of it. So it's essentially he's walking in, those kind of what are they called, wedgies or whatever, shoes that literally the bottom of his feet is at the lip of the opening in the shoe last. It's quite strange. And so Trump was worried about his shoes not being taken with him, partially probably because they're pretty pricey in that sense. And he probably took only one pair of lift equipped shoes on this particular little trip. So that covers that. Joe is still in the midst of prep here. You want to talk a little bit, Joe, about
Sure. We got the cobbler, or the what am I making again? Crumble.
crumble?
Wild blueberry, raspberry crumble. Yeah, that's going in the oven. I just whipped up the cashews with a little bit of oat milk and the meadow wort. Oh, we're done. Close to done. So that almondy taste herb adds a little green specks. Looks nice. We'll see how it goes. Not so creamy. I don't quite have the right blender. I don't have one of those super Vitamix type blenders that'll whip it up absolutely
high speed.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah. So close enough.
All right. Yes, I saw you using your stick blender.
Yeah.
Fresh berries, nothing like it.
Loads out there. Little labor intensive.
Well,
Foraging.
desserts tend to be.
Now, I had some help, I have to admit. Reluctantly, until I bribed them with dessert. No berry picking, no dessert.
Well, you have to sort of
not quite whipped the way I was hoping, but I will.
press gang that labor. In the chat, they're asking why Trump cared about his shoes, or why he was out of his shoes. Well, if you can imagine the shoe, the top of the sole matches the opening from a normal men's dress shoe. So literally, he's wearing a wedge, what are they called? A mule, essentially a mule. This is probably easy to fall, to fly out of them. And when you see them, some people did some images, and you can find this on the internet. They're quite weirdly constructed. And he really wants that extra 2 inches or whatever of height out of the thing. So it's quite fascinating.
Your description's not helping me. I'm thinking they're not platform shoes. They're like platform shoes that are angled like this or something, or
no. The 10 minutes is up.
So got it. So he's basically on his tippy toes walking around like this.
Right. No, he's talking. Yeah, he's walking in, mules essentially. I mean, they're designed in such a way that it doesn't look like the base of your heel is outside of the shoe, but it does look like it. It's pretty interesting. but that's why he was not in his shoes after they grabbed him and threw him to the ground.
Are these something you might have worn to the dance floor in the 1970s?
I have no idea. I just think that executives, only short people. I mean, I had a boss who wore lifts like this, but they had significant heel on it as well. But it's a thing for if you're insecure about your height. There is a one or two major companies I think that make lift shoes, and they seem quite specialized and quite expensive. I think, with my understanding.
My granddad told me to put horse shit in my shoe to make us grow.
Oh, why?
To make us grow.
Why? Oh, bloody hell.
You need some horse shit in your shoe, son.
Oh, God. Well, it was only a couple of years ago, I think, when Trump was running for office, that this whole story about elevator shoes came up. But it seemed pretty significant, especially when he claims he's a certain height, and the reality is he's that in lifts, not in reality. And then when you measure his height against his kids, blah blah blah, that's the other issue. Let's see what else happened. No, really, it was so banal or whatever, mundane. The convention. I mean, fortunately, C-SPAN, broadcast it gavel to gavel. So if you really wanted to listen to the weird stuff, opera singers and a bunch of other things, it was available to you. So there was no discrimination on the coverage count. Other people are just weirded out by the length of the speech. MSNBC was certainly annoyed by having to sit around for literally an extra hour. So that's kind of my report on that. Where we are now, after that, the 10 minutes was up for Joe, the baking time, I assume. The Ukraine, even though hiatus, thing is drone warfare, missiles, some tanks, not a lot. More attention was spent at some of the think tanks about kind of the machinations going on within Russia. That is, consolidating power, trying to arrange who is going to be at fault or not at fault. But it seems every week there's these temptations, the little teasers about whether there was or wasn't going to be a ceasefire. There was a teaser about ceasefire in Israel, Gaza, but that hasn't held or didn't even get enacted. And there were a couple of seriously bad events of multiple casualties, as usual.
Continuous bombing of schools and safe spaces.
Yes. It's all the same, unfortunately.
I suppose the only positive news out of on the Israel-Palestine front is that the ICJ next week will be submitting their report on the occupation, so Israel's occupation of Palestine. And if they don't hold it, it's non-binding, but it sets a precedent, which human rights organizations in other countries can then utilize, build upon, and pressure their own governments. Israel will completely ignore it, but at least for civil society in other countries, they'll be able to apply pressure to their own government. So that is a potential positive coming next week.
So is your food all set there, Joe?
Oh no, you could go on with the Ukraine. I have a little bit more. It's still it's not quite crispy enough, so we got a little bit longer. I was just going to say, and for our Windows users out there, technical support, we seem to have had a hiccup this week across the globe in largely the business world, but most Windows users that have their CrowdStrike or some other random Microsoft update could be giving them a blue screen of death. And the advice currently that I've come across is that restarting your machine approximately 15 times should do the job, or at least that is the mechanism you want to start with for debugging your situation. So,
The origin seems to be a security patch for I think the software made by CrowdStrike, and there was a problem in the patch. I mean, you'd think
so
they'd
they
have it all tested out before they make it available.
True. So contra to what people might believe, apparently it's not a cyber attack.
No, just
an upgrade.
incompetence.
But this does go to show how, I mean, we've got banks, hospitals, medical
Airports.
institutes, airlines. I mean, the interconnectedness of everything and the reliance on single pieces of software is quite insane.
Well,
not to mention the supply chain down the software line.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's global. I mean, the thing was that the entire globe has been affected by this. It's not just a single country or the global north. This is like pretty much everybody. So that was just very interesting. I mean, problematic when you think about, and this made a lot of discussions about how much this cost people and a bunch of other things. So that's an interesting event. Otherwise, it's all the same things in Ukraine. There's, small stuff where areas that you didn't normally think were well supported are now being are worse in the south. There's an issue about sort of a meat grinder approach. The losses are still very high. The Russians are throwing troops in there, and the Ukrainians are fighting back. And there's more fascinating imagery of drone on drone action. I put up today a thing on 3D printing of components for drones, and they seem to have a fairly significant a set of sub-industries in Ukraine cranking out a 3D printer stuff, mainly sort of casings for like mortar rounds and drone components and stuff like that. It's a tremendous amount of stuff being made. And I think we're better organized than the Russians are. I mean, I think there is a kind of, it says something about the Ukrainian economy and their industrial base. Otherwise, there's all the usual problems that go on in Russia. They disinform. This past week, there were a couple more security problems in Western countries. And then there's a transfer of a lot of weapons. The Greeks are giving a fair number of F-16s. Well, they have about 130 of them or something, or maybe 200 of them, a fair number of them. And they're going to transfer some of those to the Ukrainians, probably because they're getting new F-35s or whatever. But the Greeks haven't been mentioned for a while, even though they do have a fair number of those things. So it'd be more interesting to see whether they have an overabundance of tanks that they might be convinced to give up. Similarly, there are more Leopard tanks being transferred and a variety of other things. There's more French training of Ukrainian troops, and as well as the maintenance people. The Brits are still doing training, and the war continues. It's sad and strange, and that's continuing. There was the usual kind of mentioning of nuclear targets by the Russians today or yesterday. Was it yesterday? No, a couple days ago. The Russians identified what their principal targets would be in Western Europe for nuclear attacks, which is just simply, saber rattling, but interesting that they would do it. I think they have nothing better to talk about, but it was interesting that they identified, you know, three principal U.S. bases that are located in places like Germany, and other things would be simply the major capitals. So it's sort of what you would expect. Most of the major capitals, you know, Estonia and et cetera. That's at work. So these various little elements are at work. Let's see, there was another sort of quasi invasion thing, training exercise going on in speaking of Taiwan. The People's Republic did another training exercise. I think they're doing this every damn month to you know, test how they were going to do it, if they were going to do it, to invade Taiwan. Frankly, I don't think they're going to do it, and I think you know, at the think tank level, I don't think there's a good estimate of how they could do it. I mean, they have plenty of troops, but I think one of the things that they don't have enough of is means by which you're going to get all those troops to Taiwan. You know, amphibious assaults and all that other stuff. So that's kind of at work. Some other territorial issues, one minor one in the South China Sea. And other than the what has currently happened with this massive global software glitch, I don't think we really have much of anything else in terms of major stuff. There were big storms. There have been, you know, a couple of major storms. The United States is in sort of a heat wave, and that's been interesting, a big issue. Other than our current election, with the kind of stressors that have been created, President Biden did get a mild form of COVID. So whatever it's called, Plaxid or whatever the hell the treatment that helps to, is it Paxilid or something? It's got the kind of COVID thing in the name that you use to treat people who have got COVID. He's taking that. That's what he's on at the present moment. He is isolating and expecting to be, you know, back by next week. But some of that was raised, much like the smaller group of senior Democratic legislators, which is up to about, you know, mid-20s of in terms of numbers, and a couple of senators, and you know, the spin that has been put on this by the media is that all of these people are desperate to try and convince Biden to drop out, because really the only way to get this to work properly is for him to resign and the presidency, or resign his candidacy, which would be more important. I think that the idea of giving up on the campaign and letting something else happen at the Democratic convention, so he would remain president all the way up until January, and somebody else would be running. And the conundrum for many supporters and the donor class. In fact, tonight, Kamala Harris is having a meeting with some of the key donors in the Democratic Party, because they balked at continuing to fund the Democrats' campaign, simply because of this lingering disapproval of thinking that Biden is too old, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, actually, if you put, and we saw this, if you put Biden up against Trump, and you actually just sort of listen to how cogent they are about actual facts and actual policy, I think you'd find that Biden is just, you know, miles ahead in being smart, as opposed to the kind of permanently befuddled Trump, who only has these sort of just sort of lurches from, you know, soundbite to soundbite, and really, well, he's never really understood how to be president, and so the whole policy thing is sort of alien to him, considering that he still doesn't know certain things about how war is, you know, how war operates and how peace operates, and then there are bizarre claims about things in policy that are kind of absurd. You know, he made a statement, in fact, I think during his speech about abandoning the Kabul military base, Bagram, to the, for some reason he thought that they were going to be able to keep it while giving it up to the Afghans. That is, keep it even longer. And that sort of went down the tubes when he promised them the exact date when withdrawals were going to occur, and that he was going to pull all but 2,000 some odd troops, American troops, out. And so you had that incredible, bizarre scene at the end, you know, and where there was a terror event, and Americans lost their lives for a variety of reasons. But you know, it is pretty clear that they should have had more troops in place in order to simply do the withdrawal. And you know, no one realized that the entire Afghan army would collapse in like overnight. So that, you know,
Was he
that,
confused about a status of forces agreement, perhaps?
yeah, he just doesn't really pay attention. And unfortunately, he's going to get the presidential briefs, you know, now that he's the candidate. So I assume that somebody's going to read it, maybe read it to him. But, you know, the presidential daily brief is going to get to him one way or the other. And so we'll see something that might manipulate that relative to the politics.
Speaking of confusion, I found myself very confused today trying to read up on the protests in Bangladesh, and finding out about that.
I don't know.
Somehow I wound up on a page of the Independent out of the UK about riots in Leeds and police cars being overturned and buses torched in the Har Hill. I was wondering if we might get our man in England to clarify things here. I was scrolling through this article reading. They were saying, quote, drinks were definitely being thrown at the police, water or juice or fizzy drinks or anything they had in their hands, basically, at the
Nothing worse
cars, because the police were trying not to get too close because it was quite violent.
In short, though, it went tits up. But the police tactic worked.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
Because the community thought, after a while, it went, what we're doing? And there's one guy, the Green candidate, Green councillor. He's a Muslim guy, I forgot his name. And because online, the Muslims were getting the blame, because there's a lot of Muslim people living there, but it wasn't a Muslim problem.
Indeed.
It was an everybody problem. But it spurred on because a Romani family, one of their kids had been reported by a teacher to be covered in bruises and stuff. So they were convinced there was domestic abuse going on. And the social services required police attendants to help evict these kids, drag them away from the parents. And the neighborhood went ballistic, basically. And everybody joined in, but it was actually the Muslim Green candidate who stopped it all. He's like, he was gathering more and more people to point out how stupid they were doing that. And then they all put the fire out themselves. No fire engine required, police. So in a weird way, the inactivity and possibly fear of the police resulted in it looking like a brilliant win.
Fear works.
Yeah.
Well,
Rumble.
It's not the end of street violence. There's going to be a lot more of it. It's going to be a hot summer.
Yes, I think it is. Sadly.
Well, that was quick for the dessert. I'm hungry now.
Yeah. One of the quickest.
Oh, sorry, Joe. And the London stuff was because of I don't know what exactly kicked off, but the Bangladeshi community went and protested about not being able to contact anyone because in Bangladesh, all communication is being
internet
shut down by the
shutdown.
government and all that. So
yeah.
That's what that was kicking off about. That was the London riots. Oh, what a feast, Joe.
Well, fortunately, software going down on a Friday is probably better, right?
Yeah.
It's the end of the week, and so you
Yeah.
know, just hit the off button and let other people work on it.
Bounty of nature. So we got the wild blueberry and raspberry crumble
Yum.
with the cashew cream with I've been trying to remember the names today. This herb, middlewort.
That's
Oh,
there.
forgot.
Mead.
Meadwort. There we go. Meadwort. Meadowsweet. So
Very
all over the Nordics, England, Scotland, northern US, I believe. Brought by the English.
yummy. Well, let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the rest of the evening. John, you want to talk a little bit about Twilight Zone, which is going to happen in a little over half an hour?
Yeah, sure. Tonight on the Twilight Zone, we have an episode called Ring-a-Ding Girl. And it stars Maggie McNamara, who had a very promising start to her career, but unfortunately it took a turn.
Sad.
Yeah.
Here.
Yes. That's what I got for you tonight.
Are we still on in terms of chronological order for
Yes.
for Twilight Zone?
Oh yeah, I'm going in chronological order. Yes. And there are I believe there are 24 episodes remaining for us to watch. So that's going to take us to the end of the year. I think I initially figured October, but I think it's going to be December.
Ah,
Columbo, however, the last episode of Columbo that we'll watch is going to be this Sunday, and it is
Sunday.
the second pilot. Where some people refer to it as the second pilot.
He was looking good. Fresh face, rookie.
Oh yeah.
And
1968.
for a rookie, he had everything in the character pretty much nailed already.
I know, that was surprising, wasn't it?
Tonight on The Prisoner, I think we're up to episode 9, which is A Change of Mind. And we're following it in production order. So It's Your Funeral was last week, as I recall. And tonight is A Change of Mind, directed by Roger Parks. Number 2 stirs the village to ostracize number 6, and then takes even more drastic measures to cure 6's unmutuality. So,
For tomorrow, if there's any early birds, 10 in the morning, I'll be going over to the historical farmstead next door to us. They have
Cool.
a number of buildings from several centuries ago. The
Wonderful.
earliest known human to have lived and died there was with the name of this place was from 500 AD.
Cool.
So got a number of interesting things to show and tell. Hopefully, if the owner's there, we can get a more thorough historical tour. Otherwise, I'll just walk you around the property.
Excellent. Excellent. At 3 p.m. tomorrow, after the writing thing, we've moved weekly marks to Saturdays because we've been attending the class unity meetings on Sundays, which occur before Columbo. So it's 3 o'clock for that. I'm not sure whether Valley Box is this coming weekend, since well, maybe next week is Valley Box. I just can't remember.
Next week, I believe.
I guess. So there'll be music on Saturday night, music on Sunday night. Lane, you want to talk a little bit about the music that'll happen after Colombo?
No, I've not got a clue what I'm playing yet, but it'll be good. It'll be good.
All right.
Appreciate the honesty.
They always are, actually. They're just, it is really neat to look at musical acts and personalities from a very early age, and things I didn't know about what Dusty Springfield, etc. Things that I hadn't thought about in a long time. So that's interesting. We may add more things, and we're kind of convince other people to do little presentations and schedule in stuff. So we're new things are happening, and of course we've moved a few things around. Weekly marks tomorrow as opposed to on Sunday, and there'll be other craziness. I think we're at the end, aren't we, Joe?
Sounds good to me. Just let me log back in here.
We'll really try and do better next week. We really are going to try and do better next week. Thank you for watching us, and we'll be back around the same time next week. Be here or be square.
Wow.